Hello everyone and welcome to finally another character review. Unfortunately, because in my opinion no interesting characters launched, this series kind of went on a hiatus thing, and I think I did mention this in the previous one. But today we have, well, an interesting character finally. Today we are gonna be talking about Freminet. Freminet is a cryo Claymore character from Fontaine, of course. He is very unique in that his unique ability design allows him to both go a cryo DPS build, and a physical build. And on the physical side, he is the one that completes the physical trio of attack, skill, and burst focused characters, with attack being Razor, burst being Eula, and now Freminet is our skill character. Although, once again, we have a Claymore physical character, and please just stop. The one thing stopping physical from being fun is claymores, because if you make a physical character attack nice and quickly, it's basically gonna be like playing a action RPG, and I think people really would like to try that, but for some fucking reason, every character is claymore, then they are physical. But yes, Freminet is very, very, very unique on this whole thing about being able to both go a cryo build and physical build, and it interests me a lot. And so, this is why we're here. I'm not gonna talk about his attacks, there's nothing unique about them, but I do have a tip regarding them once we reach his skill. And yeah, with that, let's immediately begin with the kit to see this uniqueness and this double build that he can go. We will actually start with his burst first, because it's very straightforward and ties completely to his skill, so I think it is better to touch upon it first. His burst, it basically reduces the skill cooldown. That's it. I mean, there is something more to the burst, but the most important thing is that while the burst is active, the cooldown of the skill is reduced by 70%, which is massive, and actually the cooldown doesn't directly translate to subtracting 70% from the skill cooldown. I will explain this more in a bit and what I mean by that. But yes, that's the burst. And the good thing is that you don't need to level it up. The only thing that levels increase is the initial damage that happens on activation. So this is kind of a nice resource saver. Yeah, nothing. I mean, yeah, it gives a reduction to interruption or increase to resistance, but Mihoyo says this on every single ability that does that, and we've seen how much of a difference it can actually be in that sentence. And with that, we can begin with his skill. There's quite a bit to digest here, so bear with me. When Freminet casts his skill, he does an upward slice that deals cryo damage. After that, Freminet's attacks will deal additional cryo damage. Additionally to his physical hits, they will also launch some cryo damage, and they will increase the level of his skill. Depending on the level that the skill is at when you recast it, it will deal different amounts and types of damage. When you cast a skill, it starts at level 0 and you can immediately recast it. When you do that, you will deal a big amount of cryo damage at downward thrust, or downward slice to be honest. And also the cooldown of the skill will be reduced by 1 second through the first Ascension talent. From levels 1 to 3, the skill will deal both physical and cryo damage, with cryo damage reducing as levels go up while physical damage increases. And at level 4, Freminet shoots Pierce, his like penguin thingy, like fucking bats it with the claymore. He shoots him out, dealing a huge amount of physical damage. Got all that? You don't need to hit enemies to increase the level of the skill, and while the burst is active, attacks increase the level by 2 instead of 1, so you need less attacks to get to that final level 4 compared to without the burst. Additionally, through the second Ascension talent, if Freminet triggers Shatter, he will increase the skill damage even more. And this is how Freminet can be used both with cryo or physical. You either spam level 0 skills and deal cryo damage, or you stack it with attacks to unleash what is basically Heizu punches but physical. And here is about the thing with the cooldown. The cooldown of the skill starts when the first activation happens. So when you do the upward slice. So that's what I meant with, you might, 10 seconds, which is the cooldown minus 70% is 3 seconds. But by the time you activate the skill again, it's much less, right? That's the idea. Oh yeah, and also the burst does reset the cooldown of the skill when it is cast. So before you activate the burst, it is recommended to activate the skill at least its first activation, not the recast. The skill is also how you use the Pneumousia mechanic, and I think that for every Fontaine character that I will review, I will remind you how much I hate this mechanic. It fucking sucks. This is where I would like to give a tip as well if you're playing the physical build. Usually, you will get around 3 to 4 big physical hits before your burst runs out, but in my experience, the burst stops or runs out while you are increasing the skill level. By that, I mean you'll start your combo, you'll activate the burst, you'll deal your big physical hits, and then the cooldown, because of the low cooldown and the burst is active, you'll activate the upward slice and the burst will end. But I think it is worth to throw that skill even if buffs and the burst have run out. The problem comes from stacking the levels, since now you need to do a full attack combo to fully stack it. But Freminet's attacks after his second one in the combo are extremely slow. In order to unleash the last big hit, attack twice, and then cancel the attack by dashing or jumping, and then use the first 2 hits again before sending the big hit. This is much better than just attacking. As I said, after the second attack, he just goes so fucking slowly. And it can make actually a big difference. While many can argue that it would be better to not care about this last skill activation, I would say that depending on the team, it can help a bit with skill cooldowns and energy. In my physical team with Xingqiu, Fischl and Bennett, that last skill activation perfectly matches Xingqiu's and everybody else's cooldowns and allows me to smoothly redo my rotation. So think about that in your team. You might not care. You might just activate the first upward slice to generate some energy, but you might want to go the whole way because cooldowns are a problem. And yes, we will touch upon this when we get to team building, but because of the second Ascension talent, you must have a Hydra in your team, but more on that later. That's the main kit. Yeah, that's it. Constellations just increase damage, and only C2 helps with energy, but it is very useful when it comes to energy. It can change a lot of things on your artifacts or teams, and speaking of artifacts, your main stats are attack, cryo/physical depending on the build, and crit. But an ER Sands can be used because of Freminet's ER needs. Some weapons can change this, but especially his C2 Constellation will help you ditch an ER Sands. For substats, you should prioritize energy because Freminet must have his burst activated every single rotation, and after that, it's crits and attack. It's classic, but yeah, ER is a very big need. On the sets, we have 2 choices. Well, we have one on the physical, which is Pale Flame. It synergizes perfectly with Freminet, and I want to mention that I have been playing Razor a lot to raise his friendship XP, and it's just a pain in the ass to use Pale Flame with him, because even with like a lot of attack speed buffs, the skill just doesn't flow nicely to me when I need to activate it to keep Pale Flame on, while with Freminet, the upward slice doesn't do that at all. Like Freminet's combo nicely feels natural and flows nicely with the skill when compared to Razor. He just, jumps forward if you have the burst active, or he does the claw, and it just, to me at the very least, it just breaks the combo altogether. But yeah, like Pale Flame is so nicely, it nicely combines and synergizes with Freminet. It is the best for physical by far, and yeah, that's about it. And for the cryo build, you can either go a 2-piece Blizzard Strayer and 2-piece Golden Troop, or a 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. Even if Freminet can't use the full effect of Blizzard Strayer, it's still pretty useful. But of course, 2+2 sets is easier to get than a 4-piece, so you might like the first option for the cryo build, although it is worse, as far as I know, than for Blizzard Strayer. 4 Golden Troop doesn't outdamage any of these, or it slightly outdamages the 2-piece. And that's because Freminet cannot use the full effect since he is on the field, and this time, compared to the Blizzard one, it does matter. There are some times that you can use some attack sets on the physical build, or even the cryo build, or even energy. You can maybe use a 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate to help, but that is if you're really, really struggling with energy recharge needs. And we move on to team building after that. As mentioned, a Hydro character is a must because the damage you lose is too much. So we will start with Hydro characters, and I guess I will separate the builds. So let's start with physical, and here also an Electro unit is needed. For Hydros though, Xingqiu, Yellen, and Kokomi are your best options. Since in the physical build Freminet uses his attacks, he uses Xingqiu's and Yellen's bursts very well, and Kokomi can help with covering the healer role, but enemies can of course go outside the jellyfish, which can be a problem. Mona is not recommended since he doesn't have a good application off the field, but I can see people using her as a flex, maybe Favonius holder, and of course damage buffer, maybe even a Tenacity of the Millilith holder, or Thrilling Tales holder. She can do all of these, but she's not recommended compared to other options, even on flex. Furina from Leaks also seems like a good pick, but right now since she's not out, I can't tell you for sure. But she offers damage buffs for now, and she does seem to have a really good off-field application. We don't know for sure. So she could be a good Hydro for Freminet. Electro-wise, any good off-field is good, and here we have many more than Hydro options. Of course, we have Fischl, Beidou, Yae, Cookie, Lisa, heck even Raiden can be slotted here. Any sort of off-field, of course, just to run Superconduct and maybe deal some damage here and there, especially with like Fischl, Yae and stuff. Running double Electro is a recommended option to help Fremi with his energy needs, or you can get yourself a Cryo character to give the team the Cryo Resonance and Battery Freminet, and of course deal damage. And here as well, any off-field Cryo helps. Kaeya is good of course for damage and, well now you're also freezing, so Kaeya can use this talent as well. Rosaria is good, of course, for crit rate buffs, off-field application, yada yada, Layla for shielding. Mika, if he is C6, because he is absolutely useless and worse than Bennett on buffs before that. I tried him, he sucked. He's C2. And of course, you can also slot in Diona for shields, heals, cryo, and the likes. She's also pretty good, but yeah, any sort of application of the field to maybe help keep enemies frozen. But of course, the big thing is battering the team, and especially Freminet. And mentioning Bennett, of course, your two main flex buffers that aren't Hydro, Cryo, or Electro are Bennett and Zhongli. In the physical build, you don't need an Anemo character, of course, and Pyro is not here. Again, only Bennett for your buffing for attack, and Zhongli because of the shred, the physical shred, and of course his shield. Tenacity of the Millilith Zhongli is not recommended because he will steal the shatter procs, right? You need to place the pillar somewhere where it hits, right? You need that, so you're gonna steal shatter procs, and that's not good. And those are the teammates for physical Fremi. Because of the Ascension talent and the physical, you are completely jailed into bringing a Hydro and Electro unit, and then your last is a flex slot. Go double Electro for Electro Resonance and maybe some more damage, go Cryo for damage and Cryo Resonance and battering, or bring the flex, which as I mentioned is Zhongli, Bennett, and maybe, if you have nothing else, Mona. Now for the Cryo version. On Hydro characters, Xingqiu and Yellen, while still very good, because they rely on attacks and the Cryo build doesn't use them like the physical one, to me they do lose points. There is a window where you can weave an attack between skill activations, but they just fit worse than in the physical build. And I would say that Xingqiu is definitely better because the rotating swords can apply a bit of Hydro, while Yellen doesn't have that luxury. Yeah, they do lose points, so here Kokomi and Furina, at least, as we know from leaks, or as she is now in the beta, they are better options since they don't rely on attacks. And they also still have their own things. Here, of course, on the Cryo build, you don't need any Electro characters, so we do skip them. So you will need most likely a Cryo battery. Senhe is a must. This build's damage, in my experience, is not existent without Senhe, and she can be your battery. I tried my best to get some good damage on this build, but again, I can't really see it without Senhe, and I don't own her to test it. But yeah, she's the prime Cryo buffer, and again, no matter what I tried without her, I did not see this build deal really significant damage compared to the physical one. Other than her, everybody from before is good. Kaeya, Rosaria, Layla, Diona, and now Chongyun actually enters the game because at C2 he reduces skill cooldowns. And he can offer Cryo Shred through his Ascension talent, so he actually becomes kind of useful. The Cryo infusion isn't completely, isn't a crazy thing, but it's not useless as well. It can help with swirling Cryo and freezing enemies. But the main thing is, again, the Cryo Shred. The cooldown reduction is the big one because it allows you to weave in an extra skill use compared to not bringing him, but he must be C2. And I would guess that you should run him with Sacrificial so that you can proc the Cryo Shred. You should search it up a bit more on a Chongyun guide about that. But I would say that most likely you should not focus on damage on if you're gonna bring Chongyun to this Cryo build with Freminet. And after that, your other elemental options are Anemo units. Zhongli and Bennett are still okay options, but an Anemo unit usually ends up better. Kazuha is your best option for his buffs. John can be okay for heals. Lynette, I guess, is okay as well, but she doesn't really offer any crazy buffs. Only the grouping and, of course, being a viridescent carrier. And then Sucrose can carry Thrilling Tales to buff attack, although her EM buff does go completely wasted here. I mean, the shatter damage is a joke, you know that. And finally, it's weapons time. Once again, we will separate the builds and start with the physical one. Your 4-star options are Prototype, Archaic, or Snow Tomb. They're very equal in their damage potential. Prototype, Archaic can go a bit higher with refinements, but it's not worth refining it just for Freminet. Just use a Snow Tomb if you want. And then other 4-star options really don't exist. It's just Serpent Spine, which at high refinements is amazing and it can out-damage 5-star options. At R1, it's the best. It's very equal to 5 stars and definitely better than Snow Tomb or Prototype Archaic. As for 5 stars, Wolf's Gravestone and Unforged are at the bottom because they're good stat sticks, better than the 4 stars, but not the best. And it's almost the same for Red Horde and Beacon. They offer crit, and that's about it. They don't really help Freminet that much with damage, but they are better than 4 stars. If you have extras, and you can give them to Freminet. Song of Broken Pines, Eula's weapon, is a bit better than those, but not by crazy, but by a crazy amount. The attack speed actually doesn't help that much. And last and best is Skyward Pride. Yes, that's Skyward Pride. Skyward Pride is undoubtedly his best weapon on physical. It helps a massive amount for his ER needs, and he buffs the extra attacks from the effect, right? Because he's carrying a physical damage goblet. So, because of the high base attack, the ER substats, the effect, the extra damage that it gives, right? It gives an all damage bonus. It is his best in slot by far. Even Serpent Spine, I would say, can actually be worse than it, right? And because of the ER substat, you can freely run an attack sense, and it also looks really good on him. I think it seriously looks really good on Freminet. For the Cryo build, your 4-star options are still Prototype Archaic, but no Snow Tomb, of course. It's sort of free to play, but you do need a billet. But yeah, like at high refinements, still it's kind of good, but that's about it. And Serpent Spine can be the best weapon at R5. At R1, it is once again close to the low 5-star options. But yeah, like not many 4-star options. For Blackcliff, it's a bit of a mixed bag for both builds because the buff isn't guaranteed, but they are crit weapons, I guess. They can kind of help. But if, running Prototype Archaic can kind of counteract running an ER Sense, so that's why it's good, actually, For 5-star options on the Cryo build, Unforged, Red Horn, and Beacon are on the bottom, and they perform, as I said, about the same as Serpent at R1. Wolf's Gravestone and Skyward are around the same, but Wolf's Gravestone does end up better at C2+, because you don't need the energy recharge, and as I mentioned at the top, is Serpent Spine at R5. And that's it. That's Freminet, and that's all you need to know. I will say I love his voice acting. I love the filter and stuff that happens when he uses his burst. I do actually love it. And seriously, going from Razor to Freminet on like playing physical and trying to just give him friendship XP, nothing more, it is such a stark difference. Freminet is so much better on like playstyle, and since I don't have Wolf's Gravestone, he's also much better in damage. And yeah, I actually do really like playing Freminet, and I can see him being very much viable in the Abyss if it favors him. Right now there's a lot of bosses, and there will be a lot of bosses in the Abyss, so that's not good because you can't trigger Shatter. But if there's a lot of elite enemies there, like, Consecrated Beasts, Fishheps, and the likes that can be frozen, you're good. He's actually pretty good. And yeah, if we see any more physical buffers, he will be nice. And as I said, Furina might actually become a pretty big buff for him because of her damage, because of her extra damage and Hydra application of the field. So yeah, that sounds like a decent deal. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel to help it out. Follow me on Twitch for daily streams. And, new version is coming out, or is out, depending on when you're watching, and we're streaming, of course, everything there. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. As for the series, most likely it's going to be either Risley or Furina next. Oh, also, actually, we might do a rapid fire review on characters that will never get a video, either because they're not interesting, right? I have them, but they're not interesting or built, or I'm not interested in them at all. So we might actually do that. Keep on the lookout, subscribe, and enable notifications. Goodbye.